Hey guys, tonight we drift out beyond the reef, into warm waters that shimmer under a laughing moon. The air smells faintly of salt and something sweeter, like crushed coconut husks, freshly split and pressed between calloused hands. You're not sure where the nearest land is. That's okay. Someone here always knows. You're on a carved wooden canoe, its hull lashed tight with twisted fibers, gliding over the sea as if it remembers this route from another lifetime. The navigator doesn't speak much. He hums. It's not for entertainment. It's for direction. You see, in ancient Polynesia, long before GPS, before compasses, before even most maps, the world was held in songs. Not just lyrics, not just melody. These were living roadmaps wrapped in verses. Each note carried a wave's direction. Each pause mimicked the moment a star dipped below the horizon. And those songs? They were often oiled into memory with coconut, used in ceremonies, rubbed on skin before voyages, sometimes even mixed into inks when scrolls were etched. The scent of navigation wasn't just salt water and sweat. It was rich, fatty, tropical. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, while you're here, post your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where and when you're listening from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You feel the wind shift. Subtle, like someone turned a page in the sky. The navigator notices. He adjusts the sail using only his knee and an elbow, still humming. Something about a star that's supposed to rise just after the second coconut tree's shadow disappears at dawn. Historians still argue whether these songs were formalized across the Pacific or if each island chain kept its own mysterious playlist. What we do know is that these tunes weren't decorative, they were lifelines. There's no written score. Everything you need to know is layered into rhythm and pitch. When to turn east? That's the verse with the long, low note. When to expect crosswinds? That's the one where the tempo stutters like a heartbeat skipping. And when you get close to land? The final chorus always mentions seabirds, cloud shapes, or a sudden warm gust that smells like cooked fish and rain. Some of these songs span days of singing. Some were never sung aloud except during training, whispered in dark huts while elders crushed coconuts between stones and smeared oil over wood to preserve its memory. These weren't just sea routes. They were myths stitched into melody. Stories about gods who flung stars like darts to mark the way. About a coconut that once floated from Fiji to Rapa Nui, bearing a message between lovers, carried by dolphins and fate. And yes, some of this might be poetic exaggeration. But when you've got nothing but stars, salt, and a gut feeling, you cling to every scrap of myth you can hum into certainty. You can almost smell it now, smoky driftwood fires, the musky sweetness of fermenting taro, and always that lingering whiff of coconut. It's in your hair, on your clothes, and somehow, you start to realize it's in the song too. Polynesian navigators were called wayfinders, not captains, not map readers. Because they didn't just know where they were going. They felt it. They read the sky like a book whose pages ripple. They traced ocean swells like braille, toes and knuckles learning the rise and fall by instinct. Some even say the best could smell land before it appeared, claiming the scent of a particular fern, warmed by sunrise, carried miles over the water. One quirky story tells of a navigator whose sense of smell was so sharp, he could identify islands by their bird guano. Romantic? Not really. Effective? Apparently yes. And if you're wondering how someone memorized hundreds of nautical miles without writing a thing down, well, imagine if every exit on a highway were turned into a nursery rhyme you heard 100 times as a child. Now imagine those exits moved slightly each year. So the rhyme had to change too. Welcome to Polynesian navigation. It's like musical chairs meets oceanic algebra. But it worked. We're talking about one of the most jaw-dropping feats of human exploration. These people settled over 1,000 islands scattered across a third of the planet's surface without modern tools. The distances? Absolutely bonkers. Like driving from New York to LA, but without roads, signs, or gas stations. Just coconuts, starlight, and songs. Oh, and the occasional shark. We'll get to those later. Back to tonight's water. It's glassy now, silvered by moonlight. You drift with the current, hearing the sail breathe, feeling the canoe pulse underfoot like something alive. The song changes, minor key, softer. You're entering a different ocean current. The navigator leans into the breeze, sniffing it. Adjusts course by 3 degrees. You pretend you noticed that too. Maybe you did. Because the weird thing? The more you pay attention, the more these patterns start to make sense. That cloud on the horizon? It's sitting over land. That flick of water hitting your ankle? It's from a wave traveling in a different direction, probably bouncing off a reef. And the song? Still playing. A woman's voice now. Low, steady. She sings about a coconut tree that grew sideways, always toward the rising sun. Her verse includes the names of birds, currents, and which islands smell like hibiscus in the morning. This isn't music. This is infrastructure. An entire civilization's GPS system, built on harmonies and humidity. And it's starting to fade. Fewer people remember the words. Some melodies were last sung by great-grandparents. Others live on only in fragments, hummed absently while peeling fruit or told as bedtime stories where the real meaning gets lost between jokes and yawns. But tonight, you remember. You float. You listen. And the wind smells like coconut again. The stars are still out, scattered like breadcrumb constellations across the inky dome above. But now the rhythm shifts, not in the song exactly, but in the way your canoe dips and glides. There's a longer swell rolling in beneath you, deeper than before. You're moving into new water, and the navigator knows it. He's begun tapping on the side of the canoe. Tap, tap, pause, tap. You'd think it was just a nervous tick, but no, this is communication. This is how he teaches the apprentice sitting at the stern. That tapping pattern mimics the pulse of the ocean, the cycle of swells from 2 distant storms colliding somewhere over the horizon. It's a living lecture, taught without words, where every knock means pay attention. This is where we shift from songs to swells. Polynesian navigators didn't just look at the sky, they listened to the sea. Quite literally. When sitting cross-legged in the middle of a voyaging canoe, they could feel the rhythm of multiple wave patterns beneath them. One set of swells might be from the trade winds. Another from a distant storm that blew itself out 3 days ago. A third might reflect off an unseen island, hinting at land nearby. Mainstream historians call this wave piloting or etching paths in the sea with memory. You call it. Wait, they could do what with their butt? Seriously, though, these people trained their entire bodies to navigate. The soles of their feet, the hairs on their arms, the muscles in their thighs, all used to read the ocean like a vibrating roadmap. One fringe theory, mostly repeated in quiet corners of anthropology classes, suggests that some navigators lay flat on the bottom of the canoe for hours just to memorize the cross patterns of distant swells. They'd shut their eyes and let the world speak in pressure and pull, sometimes humming low to amplify the sensation in their chests. Sounds strange, right? But imagine trying to drive with your eyes closed while the road whispers its shape into your spine. It's that kind of wizardry. Historians still argue whether every island group used the same wave detection techniques, or if some mastered this more than others. What's clear is that no part of the body went unused. Some elders taught kids to balance cups of water on their heads while identifying wave directions, just to test stillness and perception. Others made them ride smaller canoes in figure eights until they could name each directional swell without looking up. Your legs start to ache just thinking about it. And what's wilder? These wave patterns, the ones you feel now, rocking the canoe gently left and right, have names. Real names. Imagine calling one swell Te Lapa, the sudden streak that means land is close, and another Tamatoa, which literally translates to the lazy one, a slow-moving pattern that sneaks up behind your hull around dawn. The navigator just shifted position. He's leaning left slightly, eyes closed, letting the wind brush one cheek while the waves pull against his knee. He doesn't speak. He doesn't need to. You're learning to. You realize now, your body's onboard instrument panel is surprisingly sensitive when you stop doom-scrolling long enough to listen. That constant rocking? It's not background noise. It's information. And then there's the wind. Oh yes, the third invisible teacher in this triad of sea sense. You may think of wind as something vague and blustery, but to a seasoned wayfinder, it's a textured map. There are soft winds, sharp winds, sour winds that hint at distant volcanic lands, and warm gusts that feel like the breath of a sleeping island. There's a breeze that only rises after midnight in early summer, when certain stars are at a particular angle. It's called UATE MOA, and it whispers, "You're 2 days from home." How do they know that? Coconut. No, really, coconut again. Stay with me here. Coconut oil wasn't just for cooking or moisturizing those impossibly glowing islander calves. It was used in training. Students would rub coconut oil on their arms and legs to become hyper-aware of airflow. Even the lightest breeze would be felt as a cool tickle, a change in temperature. With enough time, a trained student could detect micro-shifts in wind direction before the sail even flinched. Your coconut-scented skin becomes a sensor array. Apple's got nothing on this tech. Back in your canoe, you notice how the song that guided you earlier has faded. In its place, the slap of water, the sigh of canvas, and the barely there knock of the apprentice tapping the rail. His own version of the instructor's beat. He's learning, echoing, repeating the shapes of water until they live in his bones. A sudden gust flicks your hair. It smells different, drier, smokier. Land breeze. The navigator finally murmurs, his first words all night. From there, he gestures not with a finger, but with his chin, nodding toward what looks like nothing, but in fact isn't. There's a slightly thicker bank of cloud, resting low on the horizon. Beneath it, you think you see the faintest flicker of trees. But it's the scent that tells you, grilled fish. Maybe taro roasting in leaves. Definitely smoke. Maybe sandalwood too. It smells like home. The canoe turns slightly. You didn't notice the sail shift, but it did. You didn't see the course correction, but it happened. This whole time, you thought you were drifting. Turns out, you were being guided with quiet confidence, like a lullaby that doesn't rhyme, but always arrives at the same chorus. So next time someone asks you for directions, tell them to sing a song into the breeze, tap the rhythms of waves on a wooden rail, and rub coconut oil on their arms until they can smell land in a dream. It might not help, but it'll sound fantastic. The moon is down now, tucked beneath the curve of the horizon like it's shy. But the stars, they're alive. 1,000 glittering clues sewn into the night sky, waiting for someone patient enough to read them. You lie back against the gentle tilt of the canoe, the coolness of sea spray clinging to your arms. Above you, the sky is crowded. Not chaotic, not random, just intricate. The navigator is humming again. Not a tune this time, but a low, rhythmic cadence, like he's syncing with something beyond your ears. His eyes don't flit around like yours do. They fixate, calmly, deliberately, on a small patch of sky where a cluster of stars rises like a question answered every night. You've officially entered the celestial classroom. See, Polynesian wayfinders didn't just use stars like we use GPS. They memorized the entire dome. We're talking hundreds of stars, grouped not just into constellations, but into specific paths. Some groups had as many as 200 star paths cataloged in their heads, like having a whole galactic subway map engraved in your brain. There's a term for it, kapehu wedu, or star compass. Sounds like a gadget you might buy online for your astrology-obsessed friend, but it's actually a spatial system based on where stars rise and set. Each major star has its own place on the compass, and when you align your canoe with a known star's trajectory, you lock into a heading that can last hours, or even days. Historians agree that this wasn't symbolic knowledge. It was deeply practical. The navigators knew that Sirius would rise in the east-northeast in early winter, or that Antares drifted southward in a lazy arc just after midnight. Watching a single star shift its place across the sky was like watching a minute hand on a giant celestial clock. And guess what? If clouds rolled in, they'd switch to the wind, or the waves, or birds, or scent, or all of the above. It's like nature gave them 5 navigation apps and said, "Good luck, kiddo." There's a reason NASA studied Polynesian wayfinding when designing autonomous rover logic. These folks were the original human algorithms, constantly integrating inputs, star angles, ocean rhythms, cloud reflections, wind textures, the flight path of a solitary frigate bird. Here's your fringe fact of the hour. Some navigators memorized the brightness patterns of stars relative to ocean humidity. That's right. If a star seemed slightly dimmer, they'd interpret it as a shift in moisture, meaning a storm could be forming somewhere along their route. You're out here struggling to predict rain with 3 weather apps, and these guys were reading light fuzziness. Historians still argue whether these observations were instinctive or consciously taught. Some believe certain navigation cues were passed down only through metaphor and song, never written, never said outright. Others insist detailed star maps were drawn on top of bark or etched in sand for students to trace with their fingers until they knew them by feel. Either way, it worked. If you were raised in one of these voyaging cultures, your bedtime stories weren't about dragons, they were about Aldebaran chasing Rigel across the night, or Hickey and Alia showing the path to fresh water. You didn't wish on stars. You trusted them. Tonight, the navigator calls softly to the apprentice, who immediately sits upright. He gestures with his thumb, no words needed, and the boy's eyes lock onto a rising star low over the eastern edge. The apprentice whispers, Pwanga. The older man nods. That's the Maori name for Rigel, a navigational star used for seasonal orientation. Point of bearing, the boy says. First landfall, the navigator replies. That's it. A 3-word sentence about arrival, spoken like a secret handshake. The apprentice turns and resets the lashings on the sail, tightening the line until the canvas catches a slightly different angle of wind. Your canoe adjusts course by a few invisible degrees. You feel it, but only because you're trying. Most wouldn't notice. Most would miss that this change means you're now aiming for an island more than 300 miles away. One rock. One green pinprick in the entire Pacific. And they'll reach it, maybe in 3 days, maybe 4, without a map, without instruments, just riding on memory and light. And as you lie there, trying not to blink too long and lose the thread of stars overhead, the absurdity of it all washes over you like spray. You're on a floating slice of wood, in a midnight ocean that goes on forever, guided by people who can tell you which island lies beyond which dot of flame in the sky. Meanwhile, you once got lost trying to find your friend's new apartment because Google Maps told you to head northeast. You chuckle under your breath, and a spray of stars ripples above like they're in on the joke. Somewhere far off, behind you now, another canoe is preparing to leave. Their navigator sings the same song. Their stars rise at slightly different angles. But the same wisdom flows, quiet, ancient, precise. The ocean may look blank to outsiders, but it's a living chart to those who know where to look. Every ripple, every gust, every flickering spark above is a marker in a language older than your alphabet. And for the rest of the night, that language guides your canoe across the black silk of the sea, towards something unseen, but no longer unknown. The canoe rocks gently, like it's cradling you. You're half asleep, head lolling toward the stars, the smell of salt, palm oil, and distant cooking fires still lingering in the folds of your tunic. Somewhere behind you, a paddle hits the water with the softest thunk. The world, at this hour, is a lullaby of motion, steady, repetitive, ancient. And then it shifts. Not dramatically. Just a whisper in your nose, a little curl of something warmer, almost sweet, like roasted banana and wet bamboo. You sit up, confused. No one's cooking on board. And yet, there it is again. A trace of smoke. Maybe coconut? The navigator doesn't even look up. Land's close, he mutters. Of course it is. In the deep Pacific, scent was often the first confirmation that land was near. That sweet, loamy curl of wind didn't come from nowhere. It was a whisper of trees sweating under sun, fires puffing from huts, fermenting fruit, or salty marshes exhaling after a storm. Smell was part of the Polynesian toolkit, an invisible but trustworthy compass, especially near dawn when heat lifted scents into the atmosphere. Western navigators rarely mention this. Too subjective, too unprovable. But among Pacific Islanders? This was gospel. If the stars and swells and birds hinted at land, a sudden trace of pandanus leaf smoke would confirm it. Here's a quirky tidbit for your sleepy trivia bin. Some voyaging crews swore that certain islands always smelled like specific things long before they were visible. One elder described Rarotonga's approach as vanilla bark and wet fern. Another likened approaching Tonga to the smell of burned palm husk and mangoes. Whether this is actual science or poetic memory, historians still argue whether the olfactory notes were accurate indicators or ritualized exaggerations passed down through song. Speaking of song, this is where things get extra dreamy. Some navigation schools, especially in the Marquesas and Tuamotus, embedded scent into their chants. Not the word scent itself, but metaphorical lines like, the breath of Tefana rides the third wind, which referred to a specific land breeze pattern known for carrying garden smells across the reef. Navigators memorized dozens of these lines, each one like a mental scratch-and-sniff sticker from 1,000 miles away. You shift your nose toward the breeze again. It's definitely stronger now. You'd expect someone to shout land ho, or ring a bell or something theatrical. But no, this isn't a pirate movie. This is older, quieter. The navigator simply taps the apprentice once on the shoulder. The boy nods, adjusts his grip on the steering oar, and shifts the sail angle another hair's breadth. You ask if the island is visible yet. No, says the boy. But the island sees us. Okay, spooky. But also comforting? There's this pervasive belief among Polynesian wayfinders that islands emit their own presence and energy or pull that experienced navigators can sense. Maybe it's the air pressure. Maybe it's instinct. Maybe it's magic. You're too tired to argue. In some oral traditions, islands were imagined as giant sea creatures sleeping beneath the waves, and the scent of their breath was the first clue they were about to surface. One chant describes land as the hidden belly that exhales mango wind. Say what you want about poetic license, these folks felt the world around them. There's another shift now, not scent, but sound. You hear gulls. A few, then a cluster. Their cries pierce the horizon long before your eyes can see a thing. Watch them, says the navigator. They spiral in threes before landfall. Sure enough, the gulls will tightly 3 times, then glide southward. Not random. Not decorative. Just purposeful. You blink hard and squint into the soft gloom of pre-dawn. The stars are beginning to pale, but one patch of sky seems slightly darker than the rest. Not cloud. Not mist. Just an interruption in the openness. A smudge of silhouette. A shadow pretending to be nothing. But your nose says coconut, and your ears say birds, and your body, sore and salt-stained, leans a little toward belief. The apprentice hums a low melody as he checks the sail again. You recognize the tune. It's one you heard on the last island. A chant about landfall, always sung in the last hour of arrival. Each verse lists a scent, a sound, a bird, a color. In that order. It's like a checklist. But prettier. Roasted root. Palm breeze. Wings whirling. Green rises. 1%. That's how knowledge was kept alive. Not in logbooks or dusty scrolls, but in verses shaped like poetry and carried in memory. This wasn't just data, it was song as tool. Historians still argue whether these landfall chants were the result of centuries of refinement or were more like intuitive mnemonics passed down informally. Whatever the case, they worked. Generations of navigators arrived exactly where they intended, and not once because of a paper map. You sit forward now. You're not the navigator, but you feel the pulse of it. The island is real. It's close. The water changes color, not visibly, but in the sound of its slap against the hull. The depth is shifting. The air thickens. Finally, someone points. There it is. A low line of trees. Just a ridge at first, then a slope, then a scatter of huts. Then, if you squint hard enough, a faint trail of smoke. And yes, coconuts. You smile. Not just because you made it, but because your nose, for once, was smarter than your eyes. You step onto the island with that funny, half-wobbly gait every seagoer gets after too long afloat. The sand feels loose and too soft, like it's mocking your legs for having gotten so used to boat planks. Someone laughs gently behind you, probably the apprentice, and you can't help but grin, even as your knees argue with gravity. But the moment doesn't linger. Already, the navigator is speaking in low tones to a group of locals beneath a thatched lean-to. No greetings. No fuss. Just the ritual of update and handoff, charts traced in the air, wind shifts mimed with flicks of the hand, the latest sightings exchanged like old gossip. This is the quiet pulse of the Pacific. You stand nearby, trying not to interrupt, and that's when you spot it, etched into the smooth bark of a breadfruit tree, a small set of notches, spaced rhythmically, like tally marks singing a lullaby. For short, too long, one deep groove. It's a navigational record, but not for sighted eyes. This is one of the curious mysteries you've heard whispers about, non-visual memory systems. Some Polynesian communities encoded sailing songs directly into carvings, not as writing, but as tactile prompts. A blind navigator, yes, there were a few, could run fingers along the wood and sing the route aloud, muscle memory guiding pitch and phrasing. Historians still argue whether these were widely used wayfinding tools or just rare local customs, but the idea alone is astonishing. Music and touch replacing maps? Somehow it makes sense out here. One elder from the Society Islands once described sailing songs as water roads made of breath. And truly, many of them sound like they were composed underwater, long, loping vowel tones, the rise and fall matching the lift of swells. Most weren't songs in the Western sense. No chorus. No catchy hooks. Just lines upon lines of description, nested in metaphor and geography. You crouch beneath the tree and hum one of the fragments you've learned. O star that hums behind the crab's claw, where coral teeth gnash, and sails turn pale, lead me past the shallow yawn, to breadfruit hills and Taro's Vale. It's dreamy, yes, but also precise. Crab's claw is a constellation. Coral teeth means reef breaks. Sails turn pale refers to morning light from a specific angle. This is poetry doing overtime. Instruction hiding in lullaby. Of course, not all chants were so lyrical. Some were straight up weird. One particularly famous one from the southern Tuvalu chain includes the line, "When the shark forgets its name, paddle east." Scholars still have no clue what that's supposed to mean. One theory? It's a reference to currents that confuse migratory fish, which coincidentally align with the path to a freshwater atoll. Or maybe the original composer just liked a bit of flair. Either way, the memory training was no joke. Apprentices spent years absorbing these chants. Not just memorizing words, but learning to feel them physically. There's a training method where young navigators would sit in a dark hut, swaying in rhythm while older guides chanted wine songs around them. The idea was to anchor the lyrics deep in the nervous system, let the cadence of information echo in the bones. And here's the best part. Those chants weren't static. They evolved. One old navigator from Samoa described editing songs to reflect recent storms or the collapse of a reef. That's right, you had to update your chants. Imagine patching your internal GPS by rewriting verse 2 to account for a sunken island. Poetry is firmware. Historians still argue whether these edits were communal efforts or the domain of individual masters. In some places, modifying a chant without permission was considered a serious offense, akin to bad cartography or musical plagiarism, Polynesian edition. You glance back toward the lean-to. The navigator's still talking. But now he's gesturing toward the sea again, tracing loops with his fingers in the humid air. Currents. Eddies. Or maybe sharks forgetting their names. Who knows? Nearby, a group of kids are playing with palm fronds, braiding them into crude shapes that vaguely resemble fishhooks. One girl pauses, presses her palm frond to her ear, and whispers something into it. You swear you hear the word home. You walk a little farther inland. A grove of pandanus trees rustles, their waxy leaves chattering like gossiping annies. A narrow path winds through the undergrowth, where stones have been deliberately laid in pairs, smooth side up, rough side down. Each pair represents a chant. No joke. This island's elders have built a physical chant trail, a mnemonic footpath. As you walk it, you step from line to line, each stone acting as the verse's rhythm keeper. Smooth for open sea, rough for reef zone. It's beautiful and a little mind-bending. The forest sings, and you hum along. You pause beside a stone shaped like a crouched crab. A common motif. Crabs mean moon tides. So, the verse must be about lunar drift and sailing by night. A quiet, cheeky part of you wonders if the crab forgets its name here, too. When you return to the canoe later, the navigator hands you a scrap of coconut fiber cord. It's knotted in 3 places. Your verse, he says. You run your fingers along the knots. One short, one longer, and one tight loop. You don't know what it means yet. But you will. It's yours now. By the time you're back on the water, the sun's mood has shifted. It no longer blazes like a vengeful bonfire. It simmers. The kind of mellow golden hour that makes the ocean blush and even your blisters feel romantic. You lean back against the cargo netting, fingers still running over the knots in that coconut fiber cord. You don't quite know what it's trying to tell you yet, but your fingers remember the rhythm. The navigator is humming again. A different tune this time. Slower, with pauses between lines like commas for the wind to catch its breath. He's not singing for the crew. He's singing for the sea. And it listens. You're drifting into the realm of scent chants now. Yes, you heard that right. These weren't just songs about stars and waves. Some of the most gifted navigators, especially in Micronesian traditions, were known for composing and memorizing chants based on smell. It's one of those fringe ideas scholars argue about over long conferences and bad coffee. But the oral histories insist on it. Trained voyagers could identify land not just by bird calls or cloud shapes, but by the distinct scent trails drifting from distant islands. Wild ginger, breadfruit rot, seaweed, and fermented fish. Each aroma had a range, an hour, and a meaning. It's hard to wrap your head around at first. You've been raised in a world where smell is mostly about deodorant choices and oven timers. But out here, it's geography. There's a story about a blind navigator named Lido from the outer Marshalls who could identify 6 different atolls by scent alone. His grandniece claimed he once rerouted a voyage by detecting the faint aroma of pandanus fire smoke from over 30 miles away. Now, was that true? Historians still argue whether this was exaggeration, ancestral respect, or a lost art. But again, the sea doesn't care what textbooks think. You sniff the breeze, just for fun. Salt, mostly. A little fish. But also something sweet. Coconut husk, maybe. Or sun-warmed rope. It's hard to tell. You suddenly realize your own nose is wildly out of shape for this. That's where the scent chants came in. They were short, almost haiku-like verses, crafted to be sung under the breath when nearing land. One from Kiribati goes, where taro smoke dances and mango rind weeps below. Turn the sail shorewise. Not exactly Billboard Hot 100 material, but perfect for a nose attuned like a hawk's. Some chants combine scent and sound. One particularly strange example paired coconut scent with the pitch of fruit bats. The line went, when oil meets fur and wings cry high, the shore is ripe and near. Your inner rationalist is squinting hard at this. Coconut and bat noises? Really? But when you're navigating over an endless blue void for weeks, you don't turn down data, no matter how weird. Some canoe captains even trained scent apprentices, young crew members with sensitive noses, chosen specifically for their ability to distinguish subtle plant oils. You imagine a group of teenagers kneeling in silence, sniffing bowls of crushed herbs while a stern elder grades their accuracy like a perfume sommelier crossed with a sea witch. And if that doesn't sound like a forgotten fantasy RPG class, nothing does. One French sailor from the 1700s wrote of a Tahitian helmsman who insisted on burning breadfruit skins in a shell bowl every dawn to reset his sense of smell. The sailor thought it was ridiculous until the helmsman smelled a distant reef a full half-day before it appeared on the horizon. Your nose, meanwhile, is still trying to tell the difference between sunscreen and rope tar. You drift toward the bow and watch the horizon. The water is glassy here, unbroken. Your navigator squints forward and nods slowly. Almost, he mutters. No stars, no charts, no GPS. Just the way the light curls around the sky and the slight sour note on the wind. Even the birds play a part. Some navigators linked scent chants with the return calls of certain seabirds. You remember hearing about the sooty tern, the laughing ghost bird, whose calls echo weirdly at dawn. One line comes to mind. If the laughing ghost wheezes before first light, turn to where bananas bloom. You ask the navigator if he's ever used scent chants himself. He shrugs. Only when the winds won't talk, he says, which is basically a yes. He hands you a dried pandanus leaf wrapped around something. Inside, you find a soft, brownish lump, smoked coconut mash, pressed tight. Smell training, he says. Chew slow. You bite down. It tastes like campfire memory and the ghost of tropical breakfasts. A tiny tang of fermentation tickles your nose. As you chew, the navigator begins to sing again, this time with a nasal lilt, like he's tugging the air through his sinuses. You don't know the words, but the rhythm is familiar now. It matches the knots in the chord. And for just a moment, your mind aligns with something deeper. The horizon changes. A slight dark patch, faint, almost imagined, emerges on the sea. Land. He saw it, or smelled it, or both. Or maybe he just felt it. Scent chants aren't magic. They're just memory, wrapped in the real world, passed mouth to mouth, nostril to nostril, like a folk song that tickles the back of your brain. And they've guided people home for centuries. You wake before dawn. Or rather, something wakes you. Maybe it's the shifting wind, or the faint creak of the outrigger beam adjusting under weight. The stars are still out, faded now like smudged chalk on black velvet. But there's a hint of glow low on the horizon, the kind of light that doesn't come from the moon. The navigator is already awake, of course. He sits cross-legged near the prow, draped in a frayed shawl made from woven bar cloth. He doesn't look at you. His eyes are closed, his head tilted toward the sky. Listening. Always listening. Today is a quiet day. No sailing. The canoe has been anchored in a small lagoon, ringed by jagged coral and guarded by a wind that only speaks in sighs. You're here to learn about dead reckoning, the ancient practice of tracking position without instruments, using only your memory, your senses, and a terrifying trust in your own mind. The phrase sounds like a pirate curse. Dead reckoning doesn't exactly inspire confidence. But in Polynesian terms, it's less about grim calculations and more about embodied geography. You are the map. You are the compass. You are the weather report and the tide chart, all rolled into one sleep-deprived, salt-crusted, half-hallucinating traveler. The navigator finally speaks. "Walk the canoe in your mind," he says. At first, you're not sure what he means. But then he explains, the journey must exist inside you. Every shift of the wind, every reef passed, every island glimpsed, it's all there, waiting behind your eyelids. A mental logbook, constantly updated. If a storm wipes out the stars, if the birds fly off course, if you're tossed off the rhythm of the sea, you still have your steps. Your internal odometer. You close your eyes and try. 2 days east, strong wind on the right cheek. 1 night of squalls. A flock of terns on the morning of the second day. You count your paddle strokes in your mind, 8,000? 10,000? You have no idea. This is going to take more practice. Here's the mainstream history part. Captain James Cook, the famous 18th century British explorer, was baffled when he met Polynesian navigators who could describe entire chains of islands hundreds of miles away, with no maps or tools. Cook's journals mention one Tahitian named Tapaya, who could draw remarkably accurate charts from memory. When British sailors asked him how he knew where things were, Tapaya simply pointed to the sky, the waves, and his chest. "It's all there," he supposedly said. Modern sailors call this a vector map, built on constant reference points. But that term misses the poetry. What the Polynesians practiced wasn't just geometry, it was rhythm. Rhythm of waves. Rhythm of sleep. Rhythm of hunger. There's a lovely fringe theory, historians still argue whether it holds weight, that some long-distance voyages were aided by induced trance states. Not drugs, not magic mushrooms. Just rhythmic paddling, fasting, and low chanting over multiple days. The mind enters a kind of lucid dreaming while awake. It's not vision questing, it's deep calibration. The body becomes a pendulum. You sit cross-legged now, mimicking your teacher, trying to replay every moment since you left shore. You remember the smell of that scent chant. You remember the crescent moon and the strange tilt of the stars that night. You remember how one bird kept dipping too low into the sea, as if its wings were wet. And you remember the drift. That moment when the wind shifted mid-sleep, and the canoe turned a few degrees south. Did you correct for it? Did the navigator? You didn't ask. You open your eyes, uneasy. The navigator nods slowly. "You felt it," he says. "Good." Your stomach gurgles. You haven't eaten since yesterday morning, and the dried banana leaf wraps aren't doing much. You ask how food figures into dead reckoning. "Always counts," he says. "Time is hunger." And weirdly, that makes sense. You realize you can remember that you were hungry 4 bird calls before the reef, but not exactly how many miles you traveled. Appetite becomes clock. Pain becomes location. There's a famous teaching chant from Fiji that goes, "When hunger yawns but sun still sleeps, your half-day west from rain's first weeps." You feel like slapping your forehead. That's so good. So elegant. And so not in any textbook you were forced to memorize in school. Back in the lagoon, the navigator traces a circle in the sand with a knuckle. He places a piece of shell at the top, north. Then a pebble, west. A crab claw, south. And a sprig of pandanus leaf, east. "This is not compass," he says. "This is memory space." He gestures for you to close your eyes again. This shell, what wine blew when it passed? You think. Cold. Fast. Wet. In the claw. Sun was setting. Terns cried. In the leaf. You hesitate. Then say, "We turned." He smiles. Not a big grin. Just a small twitch at the edge of his mouth. A navigator's approval, which is the local equivalent of a standing ovation. Later, as the tide rises and you help bail water from the hole with a wooden gourd, he sings a line under his breath. "Step the reef by gullets ache. Follow till the paddles shake." Translation: when your throat's dry from salt wind, you're almost at the outer shelf. You realize your own body, your thirst, your fatigue, your sore shoulders, has become a record. A moving ledger of time, space, and choice. Dead reckoning isn't about cold logic. It's about living forward into your memory. The night is moonless, and the air is thick with salt. You lie on your back against the smooth wood of the canoe's deck, one arm trailing in the water. Every muscle hums with the exhaustion of the day, but your eyes won't close. Above you, the stars scatter in patterns you no longer find random. Because now, you've begun to know them. Polynesian navigation is often reduced to star charts, but that's a bit like calling Shakespeare some guy who wrote sentences. You've learned that the real magic lies in star lines, those invisible highways drawn across the sky, connecting your vessel to the horizon, the ocean floor, the islands beyond sight, and perhaps even to your own grandmother's recipes. A star line isn't something you draw, It's something you follow. The navigator speaks softly into the night, barely louder than the lapping water. Tonight is a good time for stories. You nod. He begins with one you've already heard in fragments. The legend of the Manuoku, the white tern that sleeps in midair, dreams and pulses, and always returns to land before dawn. It was said that this bird carried the star lines in its beak, drawing them across the sky each night for navigators to follow. Not literal, of course, but not metaphor, either. Something stranger. He points to the eastern sky, where a low cluster of stars, 3 in a row, starts to rise. That's Calupeo Coelho, he murmurs. The kite of Coelho. It tells us when to shift the rudder. You've read that European sailors once called that constellation the Belt of Orion. Polynesians, meanwhile, used it as part of a seasonal calendar, marking fishing cycles, planting times, even when certain fish would carry more fat. And here's your mainstream historical tidbit. On the island of Satawal, traditional navigators still recite sidereal compasses, star path charts memorized from chance, marking the rise and set of key stars at precise bearings from a canoe's bow. It's not guesswork. It's muscle memory. Historians still argue whether, the navigator adds dryly, the average Western astronomer could sail from Fiji to Hawaii in an outrigger with just star lines and no GPS. You both laugh. But it's not really a joke. Then, something remarkable happens. The navigator sings. Not a chant. Not one of the coconut-scented memory songs. This is different, deeper, slower, his voice almost lost in the wind. And the stars respond. Okay, technically, they don't shift or twinkle harder. But something changes in you. The rhythm of his voice turns the sky into a grid. A map. A memory palace. You begin to see the spokes of a great wheel. Stars rising at precise points on the horizon, crossing above, and setting directly opposite. Each one part of a giant celestial clock ticking across the night. The song acts as a verbal compass. You realize that the notes themselves are mnemonic, each pitch shift marking a star's position. It's not music, it's cartography you can hum. There's a fringe theory, some anthropologists love this one, that certain star chants were designed to teach children before they could speak fluently. Infants would listen to these melodies, imprinting stellar coordinates before they even understood direction. One researcher called it astronomical lullabies. Others dismissed it as romantic nonsense. Still, you can't help but wonder, did a toddler once sleep with these constellations stitched into their dreams? The wind picks up. You hear the faint slapping of the waves changing tone, more spread out, less sharp. We've entered a new swell pattern, the navigator says without looking. Different deep sea current underneath. How do you know? He shrugs. The stars blink differently. You think he's joking. You hope he's joking. You hope he's not joking. This is what makes Polynesian navigation so bewildering to outsiders. It's not just one thing. It's all things, overlaid like transparency sheets in a classroom projector. Stars, waves, birds, clouds, salt on your lips, rhythm in your calves, the number of days since you last ate taro root. And yet the navigators never seem overwhelmed. It's as if all of it flows into a single mental river. Sometimes, though, the river forks. There are stories of false stars, mirages on the sea caused by strange cloud halos, or volcanic ash in the upper atmosphere. Stories where sailors followed the wrong lights and ended up beached on haunted reefs. The navigator tells you one such tale, pausing for dramatic effect. A star led them to a god's doorstep, he says. He asked if they brought food. They said no. He sent them home upside down. You don't ask for clarification. Some things, it turns out, are just meant to be unsettling. You watch the star lines slide westward, your body rocking in time with the canoe. You trace imaginary threads from the bow to the sky, across the black dome, back down to the stern. You hum a line of the song, just to see if it makes the stars feel closer. It does. And for a moment, the idea that ancient mariners could cross thousands of miles of open ocean without modern tools doesn't feel improbable. It feels inevitable. They didn't follow stars. They danced with them. You wake to rain. Not a downpour, more like a soft murmur on the surface of the ocean, each droplet joining the sea with a sigh. The navigator is already awake, sitting with his back straight, his palms turned upward. The sky is speaking in riddles today, he mutters, blinking up at the low gray clouds. This is what's called unilangi, or sky reading, a whole branch of traditional navigation built around the moods of clouds and light. You try to see what he sees, but it's hard to parse anything more than just clouds. Everywhere. But to him, Each puff has meaning. Each patch of mist says something about wind, pressure, direction. You remember from your earlier lessons that certain cloud shapes are tied to specific islands. Long, trailing Naulu clouds, for instance, tend to form above land masses, pointing like arrows when viewed from far off at sea. The navigator squints. Land is 2 sleeps away, he says. Or less, if we ride the tongue of the eel. You choose not to ask what that means. You're only half awake, and it somehow sounds both magical and mildly dangerous. Now, here's your mainstream historical tidbit. In 1976, the Polynesian Voyaging Society launched the Hokule, a replica double-hulled canoe that sailed from Hawaii to Tahiti using no modern instruments, just the stars, currents, and traditional knowledge taught by master navigator Maupieluk. It was a big deal. Like, world news level big. Because it wasn't just a voyage, it was a resurrection. And it worked. Hokule arrived safely in Tahiti, hugging the ancient star lines like threads stitched across the Pacific. And Mel? He did it mostly barefoot, while humming. But today, in your canoe, there's no clear sky to follow. The navigator hums, yes, but there's tension in it. Cloud navigation isn't as straightforward as stars, it's more like reading tone in someone's voice. And right now, the tone feels moody. So he switches tools. He leans out and dips his hand into the sea. Not to scoop water, but to feel it. The temperature, the rhythm, even the way the salt clings to his skin. Currents, he says. They carry news when the sky keeps secrets. This is where you start to see how flexible traditional navigators were. They didn't rely on one sacred technique. They stacked them, like layers in a parfait made of wind and salt and bird gossip. Fringe tidbit time. Some accounts say elite navigators would rub coconut oil on their arms before dipping them into the sea to better feel the vibration of certain wave patterns. Others wore dried banana leaf strips that fluttered against their legs, alerting them to subtle changes in the current. Some modern scholars roll their eyes. Others admit it's too consistent a detail to ignore. You're starting to believe that if someone told you they used goosebumps to measure latitude, you'd just nod. By midday, the rain breaks, and the sun punches a hole in the sky. Steam lifts off the deck. The navigator sighs in relief and begins scanning the horizon. You squint too, feeling useless but determined. Then you see it. A faint shadow. A low bump on the curve of the ocean. There, you say. He nods. Island. And then, without turning his head, but not the one we want. Cue the debate. Historians still argue whether, you whisper, Polynesian navigators intentionally avoided certain islands during long voyages, either because of politics, myth, or bad fishing reputations. The navigator chuckles. Sometimes you don't land where the map tells you to. You land where the canoe is happiest. You jot that one down for your non-existent memoir. Now, with sun above and a known island to reference, the navigator does something new. He takes out a bundle wrapped in woven pandanus leaves. Inside are 3 short sticks, slightly curved, notched with tiny carvings. You've read about these, Marshallese rebelib and matting stick charts. He places them gently on the deck. The chart looks chaotic, like a child's art project gone very right or very wrong. Curved sticks represent swell directions, straight ones mark dominant wave paths. The intersecting arcs mimic the invisible play of ocean energy between islands. Pebbles or shells might mark land masses. And here's the kicker. These charts were never meant to be read at sea. They were memorized beforehand, used like flashcards. The actual navigation happened in the mind. So why bring it out now? Just to remind the canoe where we are, the navigator says with a wink. You have no idea if he's serious. He taps one curved stick gently. This is the one the old songs call the laughing wave. It bounces between 2 points and confuses most sailors. But not you. He grins. No, it still confuses me. I just let it finish talking before I answer. You glance back at the shadow of land. It's clearer now, lush, green, ringed with bright sand. A small canoe with 2 figures paddles near the reef edge. The navigator waves. They wave back. Then he folds the stick chart up and tucks it away. We stay on course. This isn't our story's ending yet. And as you turn away from the island, letting it drift behind you like a thought half-formed, you feel the tiniest thread tug in your chest, like you're leaving something behind that doesn't quite have a name. But you trust the navigator. He listens to clouds. He reads the water like a gossip column. And he hums to the stars. The wind shifts, just slightly, like a breath taken through parted lips. The navigator doesn't say anything. He simply lifts his head, narrows his eyes, and adjusts the sail. You're learning to read him now. When he moves silently, something important is happening. The sky is emptying itself of drama. No clouds. No storms. Just a flat, pale blue. The kind of blue that looks shallow but goes on forever. It's the ocean you're watching now, the way the light hits it, the way shadows flicker beneath the surface. You start to understand why this part of the journey isn't guided by stars or currents or stick charts. It's guided by animals. Yes, it's time for bird navigation. You begin to spot them. First, a single tern skimming the surface, then a pair of noddies flapping with a casual rhythm, then 3 frigate wheeling higher up. The navigator shades his eyes and smiles. They're gossiping again. You, of course, don't hear anything. Just bird noises. But he seems to recognize specific behaviors. He watches how they move. Are they darting straight back toward a known island? Just hunting aimlessly over open water? Or doing that peculiar spiral climb that birds do when they've spotted land? Here's your mainstream fact drop. Many Pacific Island navigators used birds as directional indicators, particularly the manuoku, or white tern, which rarely ventures more than 40 kilometers from land. If you follow a flock of them at dawn or dusk, you're usually heading home. And your fringe tidbit? Some Polynesian lore-claimed navigators could summon certain seabirds with chance, or at least coax them into circling above a canoe by calling in specific melodic tones. It's not magic, the navigator once told you, just very polite begging. This time, though, he doesn't chant. He waits. One bird breaks from the flock and heads sharply northeast. He smiles. That's our courier. You follow its path. It's not easy. The bird is just a black dot now, dipping into the haze, but the canoe adjusts course again. And now something else shifts. The air. You smell? Coconut? Not strong. Not the fake sunscreen kind. More like distant memory. A suggestion of sweetness on the wind. The navigator inhales. We're within scent range. An island grows coconuts. We'll see it before long. You're skeptical. But then you remember something. Coconut palms only grow in certain climates, and they tend to be planted near coastal villages. That smell could be real, carried on the wind from an island still over the horizon. Historians still argue whether scent was ever a reliable navigational tool. Some scoff, saying sea winds scatter smells too much. Others point to accounts of early voyagers who claimed to smell land long before they saw it, and they weren't talking about volcanoes or smoke. They meant things like pandanus fruit, flowers, and yes, coconuts. You close your eyes and try to separate the aromas: salt, wood, damp rope, and something else soft and tropical. I think I smell it, you whisper. You do, he says, not opening his eyes. And then, in the late afternoon glow, you see it. Not just a speck, but a full silhouette. An island. This time, the right one. The navigator begins to hum, low and steady. It's the same tune he used days ago, during your first night under stars. It seems to rise from the canoe itself, vibrating through the ropes and outriggers, harmonizing with the slap of waves. You ask him what the song means. He answers between verses. It's a reef lullaby. Tells the coral not to snag our hull. You both laugh. But the song continues, and the canoe glides like it's listening to. Soon, the birds are thicker. More terns, some gulls, even a fishing hawk circling higher up. You spot smoke rising from between palm fronds. You've made it. And now, the most surprising part happens. The navigator begins slowing down. Not in panic. Not in hesitation. Just respect. He stands, raises a hand, and bows slightly. We ask permission, he says. It's not performative. There's no audience. Just you, him, and the island. You both wait. Wind hushes. Birds shift direction. Then, a soft gust ruffles the sail forward again. He nods. We may land. Here comes the callback. Remember when the stars felt like letters written in motion? This moment feels like punctuation. Like a gentle period at the end of a very long sentence. The canoe coasts into a lagoon, clear water, shallow reef, sand that shines like powdered bone. You hop over the side and your feet sink into the warmth. You smell smoke, breadfruit, salt, and yes, definitely coconut. Someone calls from the trees. The navigator waves, then looks at you. Hungry? You nod. He nods back. Let's fix that. As you walk inland, the canoe creaks softly behind you, rocking in the tide like it's exhaling after a long-held breath. No one claps. No flags wave. But you know what just happened was extraordinary. And oddly enough, you still smell that coconut. You're not entirely sure when the feast begins. It just sort of unfolds around you, like a time-lapse of joy. First comes a low wooden bowl of water for washing your hands. Then a leaf-wrapped bundle passed to you by a laughing child. Then a woven mat is unrolled under a tree, and someone gestures for you to sit. The navigator, now surrounded by old friends and new cousins, fades quietly into the village like a drop into warm soup. He doesn't need to explain anything. He's home, or near enough. You, on the other hand, are still the outsider, but no one treats you like one. The smell of roasted fish, fermented taro, and something sweet with banana swirls into the air like incense. Your stomach reminds you it's been living on salted coconut strips and whatever the navigator called CT. You ask what's in the banana dessert. The woman preparing it grins and says, secrets. But mostly bananas. Mainstream fact incoming. Communal meals were, and still are, central to Polynesian society. They weren't just about food. They were political, ceremonial, even navigational. Stories were shared. Lineages recited. Canoe routes confirmed. A dish might say more than a map ever could. You chew thoughtfully on something sticky and smoky and vaguely medicinal. It tastes like sugar and earth had a complicated relationship and made up in a fire pit. But it's the conversation that grabs you. Not loud, not boastful, but layered like that dessert. One man speaks of the path of the flying turtle, a metaphor for a current that bends near Tuvalu. A woman sings a chant about the sky's second moon, a reference to how clouds sometimes echo lunar patterns over water. Another elder, eyes closed, drums softly on the mat and tells a story of a fish that led a family to a new island by swallowing a stone compass. Okay, that last one? Fringe tidbit gold. There's an old Polynesian myth of a fish compass, a creature said to always swim in the direction of ancestral homelands. Some believe their bones could point the way home if boiled and placed in calm water. Totally unverified. Totally beautiful. Historians still argue whether these oral stories preserved literal navigational data or simply encoded broader cultural truths. You're starting to suspect both can be true. A young boy taps your shoulder and points at the sky. See that cloud? You nod. Looks like a pig, right? You squint. It kind of does. That means it's time to start the night song. The pig watches. Sure, why not? Within minutes, voices begin to rise. No instruments, just layers of tone and pitch and breath, like the canoe itself is being sung into sleep. You catch a phrase here and there, something about stars resting in the sea, about canoes that travel in dreams, about a sleeping octopus that dreams islands into being. It's lullaby and roadmap and memory all at once. The navigator rejoins you with a gourd of something sharp and fizzy. Fermented breadfruit, he says. Not your best friend. You sip. He's right. But it makes your lips tingle and your brain stretch. He leans close. This song? It tells where we're going next. You frown. I thought we were done? He grins. Navigation doesn't end at landfall. It just changes terrain. And just like that, your bones ache again with the promise of movement. But not yet. For now, the song goes on, and so does the food, and the fire, and the scent of grilled breadfruit wafting through moonlight. You lie back, head on a rolled mat, and stare at the canopy. Palm fronds shift like lazy pendulums. Fireflies mimic the sky. Somewhere nearby, a child practices a whistle that sounds suspiciously like a coconut falling. Everyone laughs, even the old man drumming. The navigator's voice is barely above a murmur now. You're learning. You'll feel the routes soon. Even when you're standing still. You ask what the next island is called. He shrugs. Depends which name you mean. He lists 5. One means place of resting wind. Another means where the eel kissed the stone. A third just translates as yes. Names in Polynesia, you realize, are not static. They flex depending on the story, the speaker, the season, even the mood. An island might be Island of Sorrows to one clan and Island of First Laughter to another. And neither would be wrong. You smile. That feels right. The fire crackles. The song softens. And in the edge between sleep and listening, you hear the sound of waves. Not real ones. Not anymore. But memory waves brushing softly against the inside of your ears. This place is warm. It's known you before you arrived. But the road is still ahead. The navigator's voice again, a whisper now. Rest. The stars will wait for you. And just like that, you do. You wake to chickens. Or possibly some sort of lizard that makes a chicken sound. Either way, it's loud and it's standing on your sandal. Welcome back to consciousness. The fire's out. The food's gone. But someone's placed a lei of fragrant white flowers over your head, and the morning air smells like roasted taro and damp earth. The navigator is already up, seated under the same tree, quietly chewing on a sugarcane stalk and drawing in the dirt with a stick. You shuffle over, blinking away the coconut-scented dream residue. He gestures to the lines he's etched in the ground. At first, it just looks like doodles. Wavy lines. Dots. A triangle with extra arms. This, he says, is a stick chart. Mainstream fact alert. The Marshall Islands are famous for their rebelib, stick charts used by navigators to memorize wave patterns, island locations, and current behaviors. Made of coconut fronds and shells, they weren't carried on voyages. They were studied beforehand, then remembered. What you're seeing is a dirt-based version. Temporary. Instructive. Slightly crooked. But oddly elegant. He taps one bendy line. This is the swell that bends around our current position. This island? A whisper of green on a blue cloth. You can only see it when the moon's low. You nod solemnly. You don't fully get it, but you like the poetry of it. Then comes the fringe tidbit of the day. Some ancient navigators, he says, could feel the reflected wave off an island before seeing it. Not just the direction of the wind or scent of land, but actual shifts in pressure as the canoe moved through what they called ghost water. Modern oceanographers still aren't sure how reliable that was. But modern oceanographers also sit at desks a lot. Historians still argue whether navigators could really sense these reflections, he says, or if it was more like intuition, a kind of embodied knowledge passed through generations. You crouch closer to the chart. The shells represent islands. The arcs are wave interactions. There's a tiny X scratched near one corner. That's where we're going next, you ask. He snorts. No, that's where I stubbed my toe on a crab. Fair enough. He wipes the chart away with his palm. Come. There's something else. You follow him to the edge of the village, where an old woman is laying out an enormous sheet of tapa cloth. At first glance, it looks like abstract art, lines, dots, spirals. But as she speaks, you begin to realize it's something else entirely. It's a chant map, the navigator whispers. Each symbol holds a verse. And then she begins to sing. Low. Slow. Like tidewater pulling kelp in lazy arcs. Each verse describes an image. A fish with a broken tail. A cloud that never moves. A red moon that drips salt. It sounds like nonsense, until the navigator explains. The broken tail marks a reef where the current doubles back. The cloud that never moves points to a windless zone travelers avoid. The red moon signals danger, blood coral, shipwrecks, tricky eddies. Sanga's map, he says. So you don't need your hands to navigate. Just your voice. You feel your skin prick. This isn't just memory. It's alive. A navigation system you sing into being. One that sings you forward. It reminds you of GPS, if your GPS could harmonize. She finishes. Everyone claps softly. You realize her voice was the same one you heard in last night's feast chant. She's the island's memory. A group of teens begin copying the patterns into small palm leaf books. Not for travel, just for study. You're told the chant map is passed on through performance. The symbols are a guide, but the melody makes the journey real. There's a quiet moment as she rolls up the cloth. Then she looks you in the eye and says, "You have a good voice." You cough. Not really. She smiles. Better learn. Because apparently, the next leg of the journey requires you to carry part of the chant. Not solo, thankfully. But still, you're part of the song now. Literally. Sing it wrong, the navigator warns, and we end up in Fiji. You hope he's joking. You spend the rest of the morning rehearsing. The chant is long, strange, and oddly catchy. You hum it while chewing coconut. You mutter it under your breath while tying your pack. You murmur it in rhythm to the swaying of the new canoe, smaller than the last, but just as graceful. This vessel is crewed by 3 others, one elder, one teenager, one child who appears to be in charge of snacks. The navigator just nods and climbs in. You follow. The chant begins as you push off. The sea is quiet, glassy. The sky a soft bowl of white. As you sing your part, a tricky verse about the eel who whispered north, you realize you're no longer pretending. You remember this verse. It's embedded now, somewhere in your throat and bones. Your paddle dips and rises. The chant rises and falls. You're moving again. But this time, the map isn't in your hand. It's in your voice. And maybe, just maybe, it always has been. The canoe glides over water, so still it feels like you're paddling across a mirror, one that occasionally winks with silver as a fish skitters just beneath the surface. You hum your part of the chant under your breath, a little flatter than intended, but no one seems to notice. Or maybe they're just too polite to say anything. Beside you, the teenager rows with deliberate calm, keeping time with the rhythm of the chant. Occasionally, he tosses a crumb of dried breadfruit into the sea, murmuring something too quiet for you to catch. Offerings. The navigator says, noticing your glance. For the spirits. Or for the fish. Same difference, really. You nod like you totally understand. It's only a few hours before your next stop, but hours stretch oddly out here, like the horizon. You find yourself watching clouds form, flatten, and vanish without ever moving. At one point, a flying fish launches itself into the air and nearly slaps you in the face. The child in charge of snacks laughs so hard he drops half a banana into the sea. You all mourn it briefly. Then, suddenly, the navigator leans forward, points into the distance, and says, "There." You squint. Nothing. "See the curve in the swell?" he prompts. "Like a wrinkle in fabric?" You try again. Nope. Still nothing. But a few minutes later, the canoe tips slightly, almost like it's acknowledging land before your eyes do. A low sliver of green rises slowly from the blue. A reef at first, then a fringe of palms, then huts that blend so seamlessly with the trees you almost miss them. You've arrived. The island is smaller than the last and eerily quiet. Not silent, just hushed, like a library built entirely from driftwood. As you step on shore, a barefoot woman greets you with a serious expression and a carved bowl of something thick and warm that smells like vanilla and roasted seaweed. You take a sip. It tastes like sleep and salt. "This is the archive," the navigator says. You blink. "Archive?" He nods. "Not of books, of people." And now it clicks. This island isn't a place of navigation. It's a place of memory. A living archive. A community whose entire job is to remember things. Mainstream fact. In traditional Polynesian culture, knowledge was often distributed by role and region. Some islands specialized in canoe building, others in medicine, and some, like this one, were keepers of genealogy, chants, names, and ancestral maps. Oral historians. Walking, breathing libraries. Your guide introduces you to a pair of elders, both wrapped in indigo cloaks, sitting beneath a breadfruit tree and reciting a genealogy that's easily 5 minutes long. And you suspect that was just the preamble. The names are anchors, one explains. Forget a name, and the canoe floats off. You spend the day listening. One woman sings a migration tale that uses the stars as punctuation marks. A boy no older than 10 performs a chant describing the taste of rain on different islands. A man with a beard like seafoam recites every wind that has ever touched this archipelago, and how each one feels against bare skin. You're offered a palm leaf scroll, not to keep, but to study. Its tiny, precise glyphs represent memory triggers. The folds of the leaf mimic the folds of the sea. You read one aloud. "Shark moon sings to iron tide." "That's a wind," someone says. "Of course it is," you say, sipping more of the memory soup. And now for today's quirky tidbit. Some memory keepers here train using scent trails. Seriously, they bury shells infused with different aromas, coconut oil, charred pandanus, fish gut, and map them to verses. Smell coconut. Recite the stars. Smell smoke? Switch to weather chants. Your brain starts to connect smell with information like a nasal hyperlink. Modern neuroscientists would absolutely foam at the mouth over this. But here, it's just Tuesday. Historians still argue whether these mnemonic systems were literal teaching tools or metaphorical expressions of how memory worked, one elder says. But the memory works either way. In the evening, you gather around a fire made of slow-burning nutwood. The smoke curls upward like a lazy question mark. There's a performance underway. 2 dancers weaving through a slow, deliberate hula. Their hands shape the story. A canoe, a reef, a lost sibling, a triumphant return. The steps are soft but precise, each tap against the earth a drumbeat from centuries ago. Someone hands you a lei made of tiny purple flowers. To hold this moment, they say. You glance at the navigator. "You sure we're not just here to vibe?" He grins. Every navigator must also be a historian. If you don't know who came before you, how can you carry their path? You nod, half listening now to the steady rhythm of footfalls, fire crackle, and distant surf. The chant floats up again. Different tune, but familiar bones. You recognize fragments from the song you've carried. And then, to your mild panic, someone gestures for you to join. You hesitate, then rise. And for the first time, you sing without watching the others. You just feel the path beneath your voice. You remember where the reef curves, where the winds change, where the eel whispers north. And when the verse ends, no one claps. They simply bow their heads. You've remembered well. That night, you sleep beneath an arch woven from pandanus and stars, the scent of salt and charred vanilla still clinging faintly to your skin. The navigator says nothing. But before you drift off, he sets a carved stone beside your head. Next, he says simply, is the island where they forgot. By morning, the stone is gone. In its place lies a single feather, black, with a faint blue sheen. You hold it up against the light filtering through the thatched canopy, half expecting it to hum. It doesn't. But it does feel heavy, like it's soaked in something invisible. Memory, maybe. The navigator won't say what the feather means. That's for the next island to explain, he says, already tying down bundles and checking the lashings. They know about forgetting. You raise an eyebrow. You mean, like, intentional forgetting? Not always. You both board the canoe in silence. As the paddles slice through the water, the air feels different, cooler, flatter, quieter. Even the birds seem hesitant, as if the sky above this particular stretch of ocean isn't sure how to behave. After a long glide through waters thick with shadow, you see it, an island wrapped in mist. The trees look like they're exhaling. The ground itself seems wet with dreams. It smells like wet stone, overripe mango, and something burnt. You step onto shore and immediately feel it. This place has let things go. You walk past what once might have been a ceremonial post, a carved pole now split and moss-eaten. A collapsed stone ring that may have hosted dancers. Or goats. It's hard to tell. Most structures are half-sunken or surrendered entirely to the undergrowth. A woman greets you. She's middle-aged, wearing a cloak of black topicloth. No smile. No welcome chant. Just a question. Do you remember your first island? You nod slowly. Good. Some here don't. This is the island of Lost Paths mainstream fact. Across the Polynesian Triangle, some navigation traditions didn't survive colonization or missionary suppression. The songs, chants, and star maps were banned, forgotten, or deliberately erased as pagan practices. But traces linger in wood carvings, tattoo motifs, even lullabies mistaken for nonsense rhymes. Here, those fragments are collected. You're taken to what looks like a broken amphitheater, where people sit in a circle and whisper half-verses. One woman repeats the same line, the breadfruit hums when the reef breaks. Over and over. She's trying to remember what came next. Her mother knew. She died before passing it on. A boy hums a single tone every 10 seconds. Someone else taps driftwood against stone in an arrhythmic beat, as if hoping the next note will unlock a buried verse. The navigator explains quietly, these people aren't failed keepers. They're guardians of memory that barely survived. You sit in the sand, cross-legged, and someone hands you a cloth pouch filled with black pebbles. One for each missing name, the girl says. You run your fingers through them. They're smooth, cool, comforting in a strangely sobering way. Quirky tidbit of the day, the people here use dreams to recover lost chance. No, really. They sleep in special huts lined with crushed shells and whale oil, meant to intensify memory recall and wake to share what they dreamed. A council of elders decides if a recovered verse feels true. It's like academic peer review, but you wear fewer clothes and sleep through the method. Historians still argue whether these dream-recovered songs count as authentic lineage or creative adaptation, the navigator murmurs. But honestly, that debate misses the point. You nod, trying to imagine forgetting the path home, and realizing too late that no one remembers it either. You're invited to a forgetting ritual that evening. Not to erase, exactly, but to mourn what's gone. A line of people carries small woven baskets down to the beach, each holding a symbol of a lost memory, a broken comb, a half-carved paddle, an empty shell. One by one, they release them into the tide. No music. No wailing. Just breathing. Your navigator hands you a scrap of palm fiber. For the part of you that can't go back. You hold it tightly for a moment, then drop it. The sea swallows it without a splash. Later, a quiet chant starts. No words, just breath and tone. The sound loops like waves against rock. You hum along, low in your throat. It isn't about remembering anymore. It's about honoring what was and letting the silence speak for itself. Someone sets a bowl in front of you filled with a dark purple paste. You taste it. It's bitter, then oddly sweet. Your lips go a little numb. Memory fruit, the elder says. Sometimes it helps. Sometimes it lies. You feel your eyes blur slightly, not from sleep, but from something more elastic, more elusive. When the chant ends, no one moves for a while. Then the woman in the top of cloak returns and presses the black feather into your hand again. You'll need this for the next island, she says. You glance at the navigator. I thought this was the last stop. It is, he replies, before home. He won't say more. just walks away, leaving only footprints in the quiet press of unspoken things. That night, sleep doesn't come easily. The air is thick with old dreams, some not your own. The stars are half-shrouded, but still watching. In your dreams, you're back in the canoe, paddling a sea of feathers, each one whispering a name you almost remember. You wake just before sunrise, the feathers still clutched in your hand. The navigator is already loading the canoe. Time to return, he says. Where to? You ask. He just smiles. Somewhere you've never been, but already miss. You paddle toward home, though home has grown slippery. The canoe cuts through a glassy sea, the sky stretched wide and undecided above you, neither sunrise nor full morning, just a golden hush. The feather rests beside your knee. No island is in sight. No landmark to steer by. Just the steady rhythm of the navigator's paddle and the hush of something folding in. Or maybe unfolding. You don't talk much. Neither of you needs to. After so many songs, so many winds, so many scented clues and whispered names, the silence feels padded, like the inside of a drum, where sound goes to sleep. Eventually, land appears not new, but not entirely known either. Like an old friend who changed their haircut. You know the shoreline, but not the color of the trees. You recognize the tide's song, but not its lyrics. You beach the canoe and step onto sand that smells faintly of roasted taro. There are no trumpets. No dances. Just a single path through hibiscus and ferns, winding toward a village that blinks awake like a sleepy cat. A child runs past holding a stick shaped like a shark. Someone calls a greeting in a dialect you remember but haven't heard since childhood. You reply automatically. The syllables wrap around your tongue like a warm scarf. You've returned. And yet, you're not the same shape that left. You're taken to a house with a roof woven from frayed banana leaves and old song scrolls, their ink faded but intact. The elder inside smiles. So, she says, you've brought the feather. She holds out her hand. You hesitate. Not because you don't want to give it, because you're not sure it belongs to you anymore. Or maybe it always did. The moment your fingers let go, the air around the hut shifts. It's not magic, not exactly. Just a recognition. A signal answered. The elder nods and places the feather atop a small pile, a shell flute, a dried starfruit, a folded leaf with a dot of red clay. They all came back, she says. In their own way. You help prepare the evening meal, breadfruit and coconut, grilled fish, a sauce made from fermented hibiscus petals. It smells like patience and ocean wind. You laugh when you bite into a pepper that numbs your whole face. They always forget to warn you, the navigator says, chewing calmly through his own flaming mouth. Mainstream fact. Polynesian voyaging knowledge is now taught again across the Pacific. From Hawaii to New Zealand, canoes are built by hand, and navigation is passed on, not just the methods, but the mindset. It's not about following directions. It's about learning to listen. Here, you help carve a new paddle, not for you, but for whoever sails next. The villagers gather to sing not in unison, but in turns. Each person sings one line of a chant, then passes it to the next. Sometimes they forget a verse. Someone else jumps in. Laughter fills the gaps. Quirky tidbit. One singer insists that starfish hum during low tide. No one believes him. He keeps singing it anyway. One day you'll all realize, he mutters between verses. You feel the island pulse, quiet, grounded, slow. No torches. No feathers. Just breath and bone and breeze. Historians still argue whether Polynesian way-finding should be considered science or art. Someone says around the fire that night. But they always miss the obvious. What's that? You ask. It's a story. A living one. As the night deepens, the navigator sits beside you, sharpening a stick into nothing in particular. So, you ask, what now? He looks up. Now? You stay. You sing. You remember. No more paddling? He grins. Oh, you'll paddle again. Maybe not on water. Maybe not with a canoe. But the journey doesn't stop. He flicks the stick into the fire, and a tiny spark leaps upward, brief and defiant. The villagers begin one final chant, not loud, not rehearsed. Just voices rising like steam, curling through the palms, bouncing off the shells, and dissolving into stars. The feather rests on the elder's lap. You close your eyes. You don't need to hold it anymore. It's inside you now, a path you'll never see on a map, but one you could walk, eyes closed, forever. And now, as the last drumbeat fades and the island exhales, you feel your body settle. The sea is a hush. The stars blink slowly. And somewhere, in the back of your mind, an old chant hums. A tune with no beginning, no end. Just rhythm, like breath, like waves. You've traveled far tonight, not in distance, maybe, but in something softer. Through salt and moonlight. Through carved wood and fermented taro. Through feathers and silence. The islands stretched themselves open, and you listened. Not just with ears. With feet, with tongue, with belly, with dreams. Now, that knowledge curls around your ribs like the smell of burnt coconut. Not useful, maybe, but real. Anchoring. Yours. You don't need to remember every detail. Just the feeling. The gentle tug of the tide. The way a breeze can carry a name farther than a drumbeat ever could. And as your breath slows, the stories tuck themselves in beside you. Quiet passengers, still swaying with the canoe. You've earned your sleep. The ocean watches, but it asks nothing more. The feather is still. The paddle rests. The song ends, but the hush lingers. Soft, gentle, familiar. You are home. You are remembered. And the stars will still be there when you wake.